Years ago, my mom asked me a question I did not have a comfortable answer for, leading House of David as a Hebrew roots congregation. She asked me, "So, son, how many people are you seeing getting saved at your church?" Well, the first thing that came to my mind is, bless Yah, it's not a church. But that took about 2 seconds because I realized, how do I explain to her why we're not seeing people born again in our congregation? And Mike, I have to ask the question, as the Hebrew roots people, we're returning to the Torah. We think we are walking in a more authentic way according to what the scripture requires of us. But as a whole, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of people getting born again as a result of you and I observing the Torah and calling the Messiah by his name, Yeshua. Are we missing something other? And let's see at some point if we can answer this question. Are Hebrew roots people confident or even competent to lead somebody to walking with Messiah without resorting to church evangelism techniques? Pray this prayer after me and invite Yeshua into your heart. So, figure it out for me, Mike. Help me.
Good morning. Originally I thought you were going somewhere like your mother asked you a question, over Thanksgiving that you weren't comfortable with. Like, Barry, did you actually eat that last piece of pie?
But I did.
So I guess we're going to have to get spiritual with it.
Yes.
Let me piggyback off of that just a little bit. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they have just developed a relationship with someone who grew up in Messianic, and they were talking to them about a relationship with Yeshua, and over a period of time and it wasn't just one conversation, but over a period of time, the person said, I grew up with the commandment, and this is kind of a loose paraphrase. I grew up with the commandments, but it wasn't really about a relationship with Yeshua. This verse that I come back to over and over again in life of Psalm chapter 40, verse 7, "Behold, I am coming. In the scroll of the book it is written of me." Barry, if the Torah is not bringing us to a relationship with Messiah, then I dare say, and I mean, this may seem a little judgmental, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. If it's not bringing us into a deeper relationship with Yeshua, then we've just developed another religion based upon traditions.
Absolutely.
So,
yes,
counted as 43,601 denominations, because it's not about Messiah. It's about what you do. It's about lighting candles and all of these things. Interesting enough, I posted this morning on Facebook, "Be fruitful and multiply." That's not a suggestion. That's a commandment. And it's not just based upon children. It's about giving of ourselves into other people, being fruitful and being influential in other people's lives. But maybe Barry, as I'm thinking through it as I'm talking, maybe the problem lies in this, that have seen people come into the into Torah, into a lifestyle of Torah, but in themselves are questioning. So, just where does Yeshua fit into all of this? Maybe that's part of the problem. That it's hard to introduce somebody to someone that you don't know, or that you're.
Wow.
Or before you go with that, let me kind of back off of that a little bit. Okay, now that I'm backing off the statement, because I truly believe that as Reverend Graham said many years ago, he was asked about how many people he felt were sitting in church pews were actually saved. Okay, this is in their vocabulary, and he says probably about 1 in 10. This was Billy Graham. He later on came back and said, I think I was a little bit too optimistic. So here it is, Barry. Is it possible that we have people that have come into Torah because they're trying to find something? They went from a Baptist church to a Pentecostal church to a charismatic church to a home group or something, trying to find the key, and no one ever explained the key. Or could we say in more scriptural terms, no one ever explained the door of who Yeshua is. So now, okay, well, maybe I'll just get involved in this Torah lifestyle, and maybe through osmosis, I'll figure out what the answer I've been looking for. And all the time, the whole span, the answer was Messiah. And so how can you introduce somebody to someone you don't know? Or how can you introduce someone to someone that you're kind of confused of their identity with you to begin with?
Now, Mike, I thought I asked some really good questions up front, and we were going to have this narrow road, maybe a few curves in it to walk down. I wasn't looking for this 6-lane highway necessarily, but it is a broad subject. And it is something that I think, as we discussed briefly yesterday, that we need to talk about this. We didn't say what we were going to talk about. This is always spontaneous and unrehearsed, but introducing someone to someone else you don't know. The resolve of that is be introduced yourself and develop a relationship enough to where you know who they are and introduce others to them.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about 2 verses. One is in Exodus, Shemot chapter 2. And I won't just paraphrase it, but in that chapter, Israel is under severe and overwhelming bondage. Verse 23, and the children of Israel groaned because of the slavery, and they cried out.
Mm-hmm.
And their cry came up to Elohim because of the slavery. And Elohim heard their groaning, and Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And Elohim looked on the children of Israel, and Elohim knew. They prayed a prayer that was not based on words. They were crying out and groaning. It was more of a cry of agony and torment and being overwhelmed. And it may have been just them looking to the heavens and just crying out in pain, mm-hmm. without really any words. And God sent them a deliverer. Not a deliverer, but the chosen deliverer for them. There are times that I think people cry out and they're looking to the heavens and don't know how to say the right words, but they're crying out. I had a conversation myself with someone a week or so ago that the only religious training they had ever had was, as a child in an Episcopalian church early on. And in their estimation, nothing really stuck, or stayed with them, is what I was trying to say.
Stuck is a new word, but
stuck is staying where you're stuck. So life had been hard on them, and they had experienced a lot of painful things, and just received horrible health news. And in their words, they were laying in the floor of their home crying and crying out. And basically, it's the prayer that we've heard other people pray. If you're there, I need you. If you're really there, can you help me? I need you. And they were saying that through the process of this kind of prayer, it happened. Is the only way that they described it happened. In my conversation with them, it was, is it legit?
Mm-hmm.
So now for the first time in a long time, Mike, I'm trying to help someone have assurance that he hears prayers and that he heard your prayer for salvation, for redemption. Because they were acknowledging, they're not just talking about, they're not asking for relief as much as they are, I'm going to die. My health is bad enough that I could die in a minute. And I need some assurance that I'm okay with you. I need your help here. So in that process, Mike, I'm looking for the phrase, and maybe Acts chapter 8 will help me here. And the story where the Ethiopian eunuch is reading from Yeshayahu, he was led as a sheep to slaughter, and like a lamb silent before its shearer, so he opened not his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of right ruling. And who shall declare his generation, because his life was taken from the earth? And this Philip is there with this eunuch and said, who's he talking about? How can I understand this unless somebody helps me? Philip begins to open his mouth, it says, and brought them the good news of Yeshua. And the eunuch said, look, water, what hinders me from being immersed? Here's what Philip said in verse 37. If you believe with all your heart, it is permitted. And he answering said, I believe the Son of Elohim to be Yeshua the Messiah. And with that, he was immersed, and the man was born again. We want to either let someone else do the salvation stuff, and then we'll help them learn the Torah stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we'll go to their congregation, or we'll invite our church-going buddy to come over to our congregation once Shabbat and pray they get enlightened and want to keep coming, and eventually leave where they're at and come to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, our job is not to rob the church to fill our congregations.
Yeah.
The other side of that is, if you find somebody then needing to have a relationship with Yeshua the Messiah, do we know how to help them to get there? What are the mechanics of that, for lack of a better word? What do we do? Someone says to you, I need to get saved. Well, they're using church terminology, okay, but you understand what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me? I need to be saved. Can you help me pray?
Mm-hmm.
Do we even know at this point what to help them to pray? What would you do?
Okay. First of all, what I want to say is that this is going to be part of an ongoing conversation. Barry and I did talk about it that
You
much.
reckon?
Yeah. If you're looking for all the answers in 30 minutes here, it ain't going to happen. I want to go back before I go forward and go back to Exodus chapter 2. a verse that I've thought through and taught on so many times. They cried out, but they really weren't crying out to. They were just crying. This is a verse about relationship. Because they had lost their identity in Egypt, they no longer knew who to cry to. There were many gods in Egypt. Probably the influence of that had affected them. The same as it affects today. I mean, who do you cry out to? To the bank? If you don't have enough money to pay the credit card bill, who do you cry to? Do you cry to the credit card company? Or do you cry out to the provider? Okay, so let's don't just, point a finger at them and say, well, this is, what they did wrong, because people today do the same thing. So this was about the beginning of a relationship. Not too long ago, we got two grandsons here, Daniel's two sons, and I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the older one, but he fell or something happened. He got hurt. Now, a number of years, a couple of years ago, if he'd gotten hurt, he would have just cried, and he would just continue to cry until somebody picked him up. Well, something happened. He got hurt. And, I reached over, a couple of other people reached over, and he yelled out at all of us, "I want my daddy. I want my daddy. I want my daddy." And he was not going to be consoled until he got a hold of daddy. People are crying today, Barry, but they're not quite sure who to cry to. And so it's developing the relationship. What you're talking about with this gentleman is the same thing that I did over 30 years ago. I looked up into the heavens one day and just said, Father, I've made a mess of things. If you can do anything with this life, please do. That was my sinner's prayer. But I didn't really understand who I was connecting with yet. It was a continued relationship builder. Okay, but where you're going with this is that unless we go back and figure out who we're crying to, then if people short-circuited the steps, let's go to this. That with this man that Philip was talking about, he found a verse, he explained to him that verse and taught the one that was in the book. Roman road. Okay, I mean, how many people have looked at the Roman road again? There are people in Messianic, communities that don't even know what the Roman road is, and we'll get to that maybe in a week or so. But you can't start here. You can't start at the end. You got to start at the beginning. So this all is we're laying a foundation right now regarding this one subject. Until you have a relationship with the Father, which the Scripture says has to be through Messiah, then all the other stuff is just tradition. I saw it in a meme the other day. Torah is not the root, it is the fruit. Are we trying to bear fruit without being connected to the root?
Yeah. As you're describing that, Mike, I'm thinking about the number of times that I've seen people gathered at a front of a gathering at a building, whatever, however you want to think about that. And it's everyone stand up and pray after me. I remember as a child that was not the way it was done. Something would happen that we've talked about in the past. Conviction would hit the room. And people didn't have to be begged and pleaded with to come to an altar to pray. I remember as a kid, people got out of their seat and ran to the altar. And fell on their face and were crying out, "Oh God, save me, help me." At that moment, in my estimation, they were born again. They were crying out desperately. But we developed this process. Everyone stand up, stop that kind of prayer, pray this official prayer so that we can count how many prayed this particular prayer, and we can verify that you actually got saved, born again, and that we can officiate the process. Because unless it's done to our satisfaction, we really don't know what happens, and we don't know what number to report. So we've got to legitimize this thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that those that prayed such a prayer after somebody were not born again. I'm not ridiculing that. I'm just saying that Yah is not looking for you and I to count heads as much as he is to lead hearts. And the idea, all right, let's invite Yeshua to come live in our heart. There's nowhere in Scripture that says that that's the methodology of redemption. We've got to introduce people so that they know who he is, know what they're needing, and have a relationship with him. Our redemption is a covenant-based relationship with Yeshua.
Mm-hmm. A relationship that grows and bears fruit. Okay. Let me give you an example of something. Years ago, I was actually, our church was at the time Southern Baptist. We were, and I was ordained at Southern Baptist, which was kind of wild to me. But that being said, the Southern Baptist Convention came up with this great idea. And anybody that has ever been Baptist, that, they put numbers on the board. So one year, they had this big thing that they were going to award every church that baptized 100 people during a year. Well, I was pastoring in a community of about 300 people. Some of them we were kind of wondering if there were people or not, but that was another subject. There was about 300. It would have taken a major revival, and our church only held 60. So I was kind of, behind the eight ball here to begin with. Well, that year we had 15 people that, using the vernacular of the day, we had 15 people who were baptized. Well, after the end of the year, I was talking to the pastor of the largest church in the county, and he said, he gave some numbers and how many hundred. It was well over 100 that they had baptized. I said, well, we had 15 that got baptized. I said, but the great thing to me is that we have all 15 are still attending right now. And he said, man, I wish I could say that. I said, you mean that all 100 or so would be still attending your church? He said, no. I wish I could say that out of the 100 or so we baptized, that I had 15 still attending.
Wow. So they were just getting people wet and not much else.
I'm not going to pass that judgment. But when all you're looking for, see, this account of Philip, he was not looking for a number to send into denominational headquarters, because it wasn't about numbers. In fact, if we go to the Tanakh, when we see the account of David, Sheba, and then we see the account of David numbering the people, it appears that David actually, I'm not whitewashing in any way what happened with Bathsheba, but it appears that he actually, that the Almighty took the counting of the people a little bit more serious because of the ramifications that happened in that. So when we start talking about bringing people to a relationship, and as I said, this is going to be an ongoing conversation between me and Barry. So, set your, subscribe to the channel, whatever you need to do. We're going to lay this all out, but it's not going to be about numbers. It's going to be about relationship with people, that the fruit of that relationship is that you're fruitful and multiply into their life. What does it mean to be fruitful, Barry? I mean, this is maybe a beginning of something. And I just did a message on this. It'll be released tomorrow. People can go to my website and they can order it on CD or MP3. Okay, that's a commercial. But to me, being fruitful is when I produce fruit that others can enjoy the fruit, but then ingest the seed so they can then bear their own fruit.
Yeah, excuse me. To me, when you ask that question, Mike, bearing fruit is replicating yourself,
mm-hmm.
or replicating the Yeshua relationship you have with yourself or with others. So the seed of the fruit is supposed to be in the fruit in order to reproduce the same fruit.
Mm-hmm.
My relationship with Messiah Yeshua should also then be replicated in other people's lives. Other people should likewise be coming to know Yeshua.
Yeah. So,
my mind's running 100 miles an hour right now, and a lot of too many different directions. Let's say this: you're in a public place, you're having a conversation, and out of this conversation with someone, they look at you and say, "I need to get saved." And again, America is a churched, Christianized vocabulary nation. So people will speak in terms. So don't get your dander up and get offended where that they don't know what they're talking about when they say, "I'm going to get saved." Because in that mindset, a lot of us would say, "Well, that's very churchy." Get over that. They need a relationship with Yeshua. Help them to pray.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with saying, this is what you need to pray. This is what I would encourage you to say. And it's not about inviting Yeshua to live in your heart. It's I'm acknowledging I'm a sinner. I acknowledge that you are the Messiah who redeems. And I'm asking you to have a redeeming relationship. I want to know you.
Mm-hmm.
I confess you, Messiah, and I'm willing to walk with you. I'm thinking about Abraham believing it was accounted to him as righteousness. But their covenant blessing of you will be a blessing and all the nations in the earth will be blessed because of you, had already been established. Yah was already working with him, already revealing himself to him. He'd already obeyed the voice of Yah in leaving from Ur of the Chaldees. Abraham was walking with Yah, and then it says it was accounted to him as righteousness when he believed. It's not just making up your mind and say, "Well, I have this thought going through my head that Yeshua of Nazareth is the Messiah."
Mm-hmm.
No, you need to have a convicting acknowledgement. That's true. I accept that as fact. And I'm going to walk my life out according to that.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the Romans road. In Romans 10, verse 9 and 10, Rav Shaul is saying, you declare it with your mouth what you already believe in your heart. When we're not talking about the muscle in your chest, it's your inner being. Your innermost being comes to a realization, I know who Yeshua is, and I speak with my mouth. I declare who he is and accept that. Now I'm going to live according to what he would want. Maybe next week we can get into immersion, why that's necessary.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have come into this walk that have never followed through with immersion. Let me go back to a couple of things. I know we're running out of time today. First of all, the heart thing. This is one of those that bothers me. The word in Hebrew is not that muscle in your chest, and when we start talking about the word heart, forget the Valentine stuff and the little heart symbol, which I have a very big problem with that symbol to begin with. Do some research on your own and you can figure that one out. I don't use that symbol personally, but this is about your inward being. Okay, this is all that you are. You're putting everything into this. The Roman road that you're talking about, and we're going to go through in coming weeks, we're going to go through this of the Roman road. But if you cannot preach the gospel from Genesis chapter 3,
yes,
you'll never be able to preach the accurate gospel. And what is the gospel? The gospel is not the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah. The gospel is the redemption of all things in the kingdom. And the avenue for that, in my estimation, is the death, burial, resurrection of Messiah. But if you cannot preach the gospel out of Genesis chapter 3, specifically Genesis 3:15, then you have no business trying to teach it or preach it or offer it to someone over in the book of Romans.
All I know is say, amen, preach it, brother.
I'm trying. And we'll continue on this subject next week. And stay tuned, folks. I mean, I think we're onto something that is very much needed in our day, because the greatest thing that's happening right now is confusion and chaos all over the world.
Hi, it's Barry here. Please pardon the abrupt ending there on Mike's comment due to some technical snafus. We lost the last several moments of our recording today. Just be aware that we'll be back again next week with a continuation of this topic, and we very much appreciate your viewing and encourage your comments and your questions, especially on this particular subject. So shalom, and we'll see you again next week.